Greetings, my fellow intellectuals and bookworms. Sorry for being out for so long. It's been busy with college, and in all honesty, I've just been feeling a bit depressed, so haven't given you content. I will definitely make it up to you. Um, I'm going back to my regularly scheduled stuff. I'll be doing some book reviews for you. In addition, in addition, my phone started to get low on space. I'm down to 2 gigabytes for some reason. It's an old phone. And also, that full length documentary from Africa I got for you. I can't figure out how to goddamn upload the thing. Cut it together in iMovie, and for some reason it keeps giving me an error. Like, clips cannot load, your movie is not fully loaded, and shit like that. If you've noticed that thing going out, it's because my goddamn phone keeps giving me an error message. Password not entered for. Password not entered for insert email accounts. And it's like, it works perfectly fine, so why the fuck are you giving me this error code? Really like my iPhone SE. It was great, a good price, and it served me well, but it started to crap out. Battery's not what it used to be, but it's nowhere near as bad as the 5S, 4, and 4 I had before them. But, anywho, in addition, have 3 more queued up after this book review, plus a whole bunch in a stack of recently completed books that once I log on my book completed log for number counting, I will move on to. So without further ado, here's our book, Path Beyond the Seas. If you haven't figured it out at this point, it's on the Panama Canal, building it, the French adventure, why it failed, the characters involved, the American plan, governance of the Panama Canal, and stuff. If you did not know this, or you haven't seen my other video on building the Panama Canal, I actually went there, went to Panama and saw the Canal Museum. Great place, I highly recommend you read it. It tells you some things you might not have known about it, like how some people were saying the Panama Canal was the first socialist government, and the people coming back from it after seeing how well socialism worked would demand it at home. But that didn't happen, and honestly, the government of the Panama Canal was not socialist. Yeah, they provided housing for their workers, but it was kind of given as a housing allowance type thing. Yeah, you worked for the canal company, and yes, you got discount cheap food. Honestly, the food system there eventually turned into the military commissar system. But the food was so cheap that even when prices increased in New York for beef, they went down in the canal zone. Some other things, interesting things, they had incentives to get married. For example, you were awarded housing based on what position you held. The higher wages, higher pay level resulted in, you know, better housing and more space. If you had a wife, you got another extra 200 square feet, which doubled it. For each kid you had up to the age of 18, you got another 150 square feet. And after 18, you got 125. So it created a series of incentives for people to marry. Another interesting thing forgotten about, I'm sure you've heard about the Silver and Gold Roll, which basically paid black workers less and gave them less conditions. And it does talk about how black workers were very crammed into slums or wherever they could find in Panama City and Cologne. But it also covers the fact that the mortality rate in the Panama Canal Zone was better than the best parts of the states at the time. For example, New York and California, it had a record low mortality rate, even with a high black mortality rate, with elimination of, malaria and yellow fever, or basically almost practically eliminated from the entire country, at least from the major areas. And thank God for us, even though I don't believe in God, we weren't building it through the fucking Darien Gap, which is one of the only areas where malaria, yellow fever remain in Panama. But the point is, the mortality rate dropped substantially, and even though blacks had like a 10 times greater chance of dying, and that increased the mortality rate because they died more frequently, it was still the lowest in the world, and they were still doing a lot better than in a lot of states. So there was a record health achievement there with introduction of what the U.S. colonel who in the Spanish American War who discovered that mosquitoes spread disease, Gorgia. I don't fucking know how to pronounce his name. All I know is that he's a Spanish American who discovered from Cuba originally, who discovered that malaria spread mosquitoes, and he partook in sanitation campaigns as part of the Spanish American War to take care of our new possessions. You know, the Philippines, Cuba, Puerto Rico, plus Guam and all the others. Some people today, I being one of them, believe that the Philippines and Cuba would be better off today if they were still in our hands. But anywho, that's a story for another time. So, what you may not know is there's another interesting tale in this. They encouraged people to bring their wives and kids, and after the mortality rate dropped, people started doing that. And after it was completed, there was a huge drop off in the workforce because you don't need all these builders once you've completed it. But a lot of people fucking stayed. And there was, honestly, it was an American held territory called the Canal Zone up until, I believe, 1999 when we transferred title over it. We signed a treaty for 99 years or forever, and we probably would have kept it if we could. But in 1979, we hammered out an agreement and agreed to transfer sovereignty in 99. Although that agreement upset many people because some people mistakenly thought that we were giving it back to Panama 20 years early. But there was an actual plan discussed in this book to settle the Panama Canal Zone with American families who would live there permanently. It was vetoed for obvious reasons. Basically, once you moved people in there, once you permanently settled the Canal Zone with Americans, there would be no goddamn way we would ever leave, because we've never given up an inhabited territory. A few of our guano islands, which are islands we claimed under the Bird Guano Act, which basically gave us the authority to claim any piece of any island we wanted to mine bird crap, which is a dead letter. We still contain some of the islands, though. We've ended up transferring a few of them back to host countries, but the only reason we ever transfer them back is when we're dragged in legal court and we try to defend it. And we don't like to give up land. We basically almost never do, and when we sign treaties, we almost always gang. But occasionally we'll lose a few square miles or even a few 100 acres, but we'll always gang more. Anywho, so we've only transferred like 3 of them, and despite having 5 more that sovereignty is disputed, we don't really want to give them up. And those are uninhabited. There's no way in hell we're giving Puerto Rico independence. Honestly, we're probably more likely to make it a state or leave it a territory. But it would create voting blocks, as mentioned, that would, demand to be either made a state or kept. So we didn't do it. It also mentions another less known story that in the Panama Canal Zone, basically, the government not only encouraged you to get married, but they basically gave people in the Panama Canal Zone unmarried. Basically, they set up like a primitive mail order bride system where women from San Francisco and New York were brought in. And it is mentioned in here, and since it has access to primary sources, because he was a historian and he did, I don't doubt that it's true. It's coming from a credible source. But when doing digging, it's one of those things that I haven't been able to verify, but since it has access to credible sources, it's almost certainly true. Like how they wanted to build, next to the Pentagon, a 20-floor office building with a giant badass fucking flame going out of it to celebrate our winning World War II in a new imperial age for America. And it would have been a great fucking building, but it was never built. And it was no one of those from an expert historian, so there's a source for that, but I wasn't able to fucking find it because, even being in university, you can't, sometimes it's just too damn hard to get access to these sources. So, great book. I highly recommend it. Sorry for ranting about other things, but I did cover all my bases. So, 5 out of 5 stars. I really recommend that you buy it from preferably Barnes& Noble or your local bookstore, but I understand that Amazon sometimes doesn't have things that cater to my esoteric taste, and or Barnes& Noble, and then you have to buy from Amazon. Anywho, I got it 20% off because it was on sale from the store itself, plus with my Barnes& Noble membership, I got another 10% off. Well worth the $25 I spend. Anywho, Barnes& Noble went private, if you did not know, meaning that a hedge fund group bought out Barnes& Noble, $6.50 a share, which is 50 cents above, which basically means that Barnes& Noble can, rather than going bankrupt, they can make decisions in their best interest without having shareholders breathe down their necks. And I really hope that it saves Barnes& Noble because it might do so. However, the stories of all these companies that went private only to fail really disheartens me. So I probably will go in there after Christmas when I get all my gift cards just to see what's changed. But anywho, so please support your local bookstore, keep them in business, and at the very least, when you buy from Amazon, try and, buy from trusted sellers. And I get that penny books with $3.99 shipping are very interesting, and honestly, I've taken them more times than I can count. And they probably either break even, might even lose money on it. Both shipping charges, they probably do alright. Anywho, I love the cheap books, but sometimes you just gotta pay $1.50, $1.50 plus the shipping, so the company, the people who supply you your books will do alright because they're warehouses. And so I really hope you support your local bookstore. But I don't care where you get it. Honestly, you should probably buy it. Library book sales, local bookstore, Amazon, Barnes& Noble. So yeah, like, comment, and subscribe if you've not done so. This is Sean Hartnett wishing you a good rest of your day, and I will give you quite possibly a political rant video or an economics video over the weekend, and probably more. So, bye.